Hello, welcome to On Air. I'm your host, Klara Syrewicz. Here's a riddle. What can be both the country's greatest weapon and its biggest weakness? Energy resources. Today we're looking at how energy security has become a key geopolitical tool, and in our report we focus on Europe's big return to civilian nuclear power. Ever been to a Kraftwerk concert? That was the vibe at this year's launch of the Baltic ENTSO-E connection to the EU grid. This formal rave party, led by MC von der Leyen, had cause for celebration. 3 former Soviet states, at long last, were able to disassociate their electric networks from Russia and Belarus, an obviously risky status quo.
From now on, we have achieved full energy independence. The period of political pressure and blackmail is finally over.
For a chilling glimpse of the kind of chaos a sudden grid cutoff may cause, look no further than the recent blackout across Spain and Portugal, or the bombing of Ukraine's power infrastructure in midwinter. Even 24 hours without electricity can lead to communication shutdowns, food and water shortages, and a full-blown humanitarian crisis. It turns out strategic control of energy supply is a formidable weapon, second only to a nuclear attack in its ability to cripple an entire nation. The electrical grid is particularly vulnerable given its growing importance as we shift from gas and petrol to electric alternatives. The Iberian blackout illustrates that a disruption in one area can cascade across vast regions. The still unresolved question of whether some form of sabotage was behind this incident has rogue state actors and terrorists alike salivating at the vulnerabilities it exposed. Indeed, energy infrastructure sabotage, from cable cutting to cyber attacks, is an escalating threat. Over the past 5 years, undersea energy and communication lines have been repeatedly damaged, especially in the Baltic Sea and near Taiwan, clear symptoms of Russia's and China's hybrid warfare. In March, China unveiled a new cable-cutting ship designed to destroy even the most fortified underwater power lines. Meanwhile, Poland recently faced an unprecedented wave of Russian cyber attacks, targeting power plants and other critical infrastructure. The threat of a Stuxnet-style virus, one that causes gradual hardware damage leading to major failures, remains a chilling possibility. Just last week, a German government-backed report warned that Chinese-made systems could allow Beijing to remotely shut down wind farms or extract sensitive data if Germany continued using their components. Countries relying on Russia's Rosatom, like Hungary, face similar risks. At best, they become dependent on expensive expertise and spare parts. At worst, those can be withheld entirely. Energy blackmail is one of Russia's favored tactics, with immediate, severe consequences for economies and societies. After its invasion in 2022, Moscow cut gas flows to Ukraine and the EU, a move additionally built on by a year of gradually reducing supplies, driving up prices and draining European reserves. Gazprom has also leveraged pricing, offering discounts to allies like Hungary and Slovakia, while hiking rates for adversaries, especially during political crises or elections, to sway their outcomes. Control over energy infrastructure and transit routes is another lever of influence. For instance, Azerbaijan built pipelines to bypass Armenia during the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. But most notably, Russia's Nord Stream 2 and Turk Stream projects were designed to sideline Ukraine, cutting its transit revenues and weakening its political clout after the 2014 annexation of Crimea.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I get your help now with the countdown?
Germany's handling of the Nord Stream 2 saga is now seen as a case study in geopolitical manipulation.
We have become too dependent on Russian gas in this country. And I say we. That was a mistake. It was a case of great political stupidity, and it was perhaps also enormously naive.
In times of conflict, naivety comes at a high price. Despite efforts to cut ties with Russian gas, the EU still struggles. even in seemingly unrelated areas like agriculture. Russia turns its cheap gas into ammonia, then fertilizer, which the EU continues to buy like there's no tomorrow. Although tariffs have finally been imposed, a farmer's backlash remains a real risk. And while pipeline imports from Russia have dropped, LNG shipments have surged. Last year, 1.2 million tons of Russian LNG entered the EU, with 59% going to France, 23% to Belgium, and the rest to the Netherlands, Portugal and Spain. Brussels plans to ban new Russian gas deals by the end of 2025 and phase out existing contracts by 2027. The proposal, up for debate next month, needs backing from the European Parliament and the majority of member states. Surprise, surprise, Hungary and Slovakia oppose it. These are the costs the EU now faces to preserve its prosperity and security, not only because Russia uses gas as blackmail or funds its military through sales, but because Europe is now effectively compelled to buy large volumes of pricey American LNG as a kind of geopolitical protection racket, possibly to alleviate tariffs or in exchange for security guarantees. But energy dependence cuts both ways. What serves as a weapon can also become a liability. Take Kaliningrad, Russia's exclave, now effectively reliant on its neighbours. The Baltic states cut it off from the Russian grid, and its gas imports transit through Lithuania. Meanwhile, Russia is also hostage to oil prices, its main revenue source. Last week, OPEC shocked markets by announcing a production boost 3 times larger than expected, tanking already low oil prices. If they fall below $70 a barrel, or $60 as per sanctions, Russia's slowing economy could face serious trouble. Drop further and the war machine will stall. So why would Russia, an OPEC member, go along with this? Possibly because prices are already low and cutting production isn't viable. Better to pump more and offset losses with volume. But the more probable scenario lies in Donald Trump's recent visit to Saudi Arabia and the behind-the-scenes negotiations that followed. Trump wants lower oil prices now, even if it hurts the US shale industry in the long run. He campaigned on the promise of cheaper energy, and with tariffs potentially driving up inflation, this might be the only lower price he will muster. In fact, if Trump continues down the path of a trade war, cheap fuel could be the last buffer against a recession. Trump has also argued that cutting Russia's oil revenue is the fastest way to end the war in Ukraine. Just recently, he hinted that
I think Russia, with the price of oil right now, oil's gone down, I think we're in a good position to settle. They want to settle.
Saudi Arabia, OPEC's de facto leader, is the one driving down those prices and has never shied away from weaponizing its oil production. In 2020, when Russia resisted deeper cuts, Riyadh flooded the market in retaliation, triggering a price war that sent crude plunging nearly 70%. Russia weathered it then, but its economy is far weaker now, so the impact will bite harder. In return, Riyadh wants things from Trump: Red Sea security guarantees, arms deals, civilian nuclear cooperation, and alignment on Iran. Good luck with all that. So far, the only concrete US gesture has been to lift sanctions on Syria. Falling global oil prices have another side effect. They stall the shift to greener energy, something the US seems intent on reinforcing. At the recent Energy Security Conference in London, the US delegate pushed the drill baby drill agenda, luckily to an unconvinced assembly.
We are facing a new paradigm for energy security. In Europe, we witnessed firsthand how Russia intentionally weaponized energy supplies. In the Middle East, conflict has stoked instability and threatened global shipping. And across the Atlantic, the threat of tariffs risks further disruption of crucial supply chains.
That's because in the last few years, oil and gas price volatility, driven by the Red Sea blockade, wars in Syria, Ukraine, and in Gaza, has given everyone pause. Energy is now discussed alongside defence and military strategy, with locally produced renewables increasingly seen as the only secure path beyond fossil fuels. But as UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy noted in a closed-door session, securing the supply chains for renewables presents its own challenges. Rare earths, vital for wind turbines, EV batteries and solar panels, are largely controlled by China, which processes 60 to 80% of the global supply. In response, the EU has rolled out a long-term plan to develop mining and recycling facilities across Europe. But implementation will take years. And until then, the threat of energy blackmail remains a very real danger. Hollywood loves a comeback story, though it's unlikely to glamorize the slow, tacit return of nuclear power plants. Chernobyl and Fukushima had far greater screenplay potential. But energy realpolitik has shifted both lawmakers and public opinion. From Lithuania's Soviet-era reactors to Poland's billion-euro partnerships, the atom is no longer taboo.
Once the pride of Soviet engineering, Lithuania's Ignalina nuclear power plant became a political liability in the country's EU accession talks. Its reactor, identical to those used in the ill-fated Chernobyl power plant, raised safety concerns across Europe. At a time of rising environmental and security anxieties, the EU made Ignalina's closure a condition for membership.
We feel very sorry for our company, for the jobs of our people, and for all the additional money that will have to be spent on electricity and utilities.
It pushed the country into an energy crisis. With no alternatives for energy production and dependent on Russian infrastructure, Lithuania faced years of inflated energy costs dictated by external pricing. Then came Fukushima. The 2011 disaster, triggered by a massive earthquake and tsunami in Japan, renewed global fears about nuclear safety. Germany reacted decisively, shutting down 8 reactors and setting a timeline to phase out the rest by 2022. Chancellor Angela Merkel declared the nuclear era over for Germany, aiming to pivot fully to renewables. But the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine upended Europe's energy calculations. With gas supplies weaponized and prices soaring, the nuclear debate returned to center stage. And many of those who had once advocated for closures were now reconsidering their initial stance.
The whole party board is completely convinced that shutting down the nuclear plants was a serious mistake. We're proposing to keep nuclear power for a couple more years.
While Friedrich Merz, Germany's new leader, hasn't promised a full reactor reboot, he has voiced support for small modular reactors and nuclear collaboration with France. France, largely insulated from the crisis due to its 70% nuclear share, has doubled down on its atomic strategy.
Et nous avons une stratégie complète.
By 2030, fossil fuels will be largely in the minority of the French energy mix for the first time since the Industrial Revolution. And we will have to definitively turn the page on oil by 2040 to 2045, and on gas by 2050.
After a massive blackout, Spain is witnessing a heated national debate over its energy policy. In 2019, the country shut down 7 nuclear reactors, a move now fiercely criticized by the opposition, which blames it for the recent outage.
Más caros, más contaminantes.
Critics argue that abandoning nuclear power has weakened Spain's energy security at a critical time.
Germany realized it had made a mistake and stopped its plan to dismantle nuclear power plants. Italy understands it needs to build new plants, and so does Poland.
Poland, long dependent on coal and Russian imports, is racing to build its first nuclear power plant. The efforts gained momentum in April, when its state energy firm signed an engineering deal with US partners, outlining a $51 billion project which will see Poland's first nuclear plant built on the Baltic coast. Poland's push is now part of a wider European resurgence. As many as 14 EU member states expressed their intention to fully harness the potential of nuclear power at last year's Nuclear Energy Summit, signaling that the return to the atom is no longer a question of if, but how soon.
Brace yourselves for more debates on nuclear power throughout Europe in the coming months. Thank you for being with us, and we'll see you next week.